The Toba supervolcanic eruption. The Toba supervolcanic eruption. Around 74,000 years ago, the Toba supervolcano in present-day Sumatra, Indonesia, erupted in one of the largest known volcanic events in Earth's history. This eruption was approximately 5,000 times more powerful than the 1980 Mount St. Helens eruption. It expelled nearly 2,800 cubic kilometers of volcanic ash and debris into the atmosphere, leading to a global environmental catastrophe. The Toba eruption released so much sulfur dioxide and ash that it likely triggered a volcanic winter. This phenomenon is caused by aerosols in the stratosphere reflecting sunlight away from Earth, leading to a significant drop in global temperatures, estimated at around 3 to 5 degrees Celsius for several years, with lingering effects for decades. The ashfall also devastated large areas of South Asia and likely altered monsoon patterns. According to the Toba catastrophe theory, this cooling had a dramatic impact on ecosystems and may have caused severe droughts and crop failures worldwide. The theory suggests that human populations at the time were severely reduced due to famine and environmental stress. Genetic studies have identified a potential bottleneck in human evolution that coincides roughly with this period, with some estimates suggesting that the global human population may have declined to as few as 3,000 to 10,000 individuals. However, this theory remains debated. Archaeological evidence from regions like southern India and Africa suggests that early Homo sapiens may have survived the aftermath of the eruption relatively unscathed, adapting to the new conditions. Tools and artifacts from before and after the eruption appear similar, implying cultural continuity. Despite the debate about the exact scale of its demographic impact, the eruption clearly had far-reaching effects on the planet's climate and ecosystems. It's one of the most dramatic reminders in prehistory of how a single natural event could come close to wiping out early humans, long before written history or modern science existed to record it. The Black Death. The Black Death. The Black Death, which struck Europe between 1347 and 1351, was one of the deadliest pandemics in recorded history. Believed to be caused by the bacterium Yersinia pestis, it arrived via merchant ships that docked in Sicilian ports, likely carried by infected fleas on rats. Once ashore, the plague spread rapidly, killing millions in just a few short years. The pandemic manifested in 3 forms: bubonic, septicemic, and pneumonic. Bubonic plague caused painful swellings called buboes. Septicemic plague infected the bloodstream and was nearly always fatal. And pneumonic plague, the most contagious form, infected the lungs and could spread through the air. These forms often acted in combination, and mortality rates were staggering. Some cities saw over 70% of their population wiped out within months. It's estimated that the Black Death killed between 25 and 50 million people in Europe, around 1/3 to 1/2 of the population at the time. Globally, including North Africa and Asia, the death toll may have reached 75 to 100 million people. The plague did not discriminate. Peasants, nobles, clergy, and merchants all died in huge numbers. The sudden loss of life led to enormous social and economic upheaval. Labor became scarce, leading to better wages for workers and the collapse of the feudal system in many regions. Entire villages were abandoned, and farmlands lay fallow. Religious institutions, unable to provide answers or stop the suffering, lost influence. Some communities turned to superstition or blamed minority groups, such as Jews, for the plague, resulting in horrific pogroms. Interestingly, the Black Death may have also influenced genetics. Some studies suggest that survivors carried genetic traits that provided resistance to other diseases, including HIV. The pandemic reshaped European society and marked the end of the medieval era. It remains one of the clearest examples of how disease can bring human civilization to the brink, changing history in the process. The 1918 Influenza Pandemic. The 1918 influenza pandemic, often called the Spanish flu, was one of the deadliest outbreaks of infectious disease in human history. It emerged during the final year of World War I and spread with astonishing speed across the globe. Estimates suggest that about 500 million people, roughly one-third of the world's population at the time, were infected, and between 50 to 100 million people died. Unlike typical seasonal flu viruses, which tend to affect the very young and very old, the 1918 strain had a unique and terrifying pattern. It disproportionately killed young adults between the ages of 20 and 40. This unusual mortality profile is believed to be due to a phenomenon known as a cytokine storm, where the body's immune system overreacts to the virus, causing more damage than the virus itself. The virus is thought to have originated in a military camp in Kansas, USA, though its exact origin is still debated. It quickly spread among soldiers and civilians alike, aided by the movement of troops and poor sanitary conditions during the war. Wartime censorship also prevented some countries from reporting the outbreak initially, leading to the misconception that Spain, being neutral and open about its casualties, was the epicenter. Hospitals were overwhelmed, and many communities lacked doctors and nurses because so many had been sent to the war front. In some cities, mass graves had to be dug as bodies piled up. Essential services were disrupted, and panic gripped populations worldwide. In some places, people stayed indoors for weeks, and public gatherings were banned. What made the pandemic especially frightening was its speed and severity. Entire households were sometimes infected and dead within days. In Philadelphia, over 12,000 people died in a matter of weeks after a public parade accelerated the spread of the virus. Despite its scale, the 1918 pandemic is often overlooked in history books, overshadowed by the war. However, it remains one of the most sobering examples of how a virus, without any deliberate malice or intent, can threaten the stability of human civilization in a matter of months. Cold War, nuclear close calls. During the Cold War, roughly 1947 to 1991, the threat of global nuclear annihilation was a constant shadow looming over humanity. The arms race between the United States and the Soviet Union led to the development and deployment of thousands of nuclear warheads, many of them on hair-trigger alert. Though no nuclear war ever broke out, the world came terrifyingly close on several occasions. One of the most critical incidents occurred on September 26, 1983, when Soviet early warning systems falsely detected incoming U.S. nuclear missiles. Protocol required the officer on duty to report the threat up the chain of command, potentially triggering a retaliatory strike. However, Lieutenant Colonel Stanislav Petrov, stationed at a secret bunker near Moscow, suspected it was a false alarm. He chose to trust his instincts rather than computers and did not report the alert as an actual attack. He was later proven correct. It was a false reading caused by a satellite error. Petrov's decision likely saved the world from a full-scale nuclear war. Another near disaster happened during the Cuban Missile Crisis in October 1962. The Soviet Union had secretly placed nuclear missiles in Cuba, just 90 miles from the U.S. mainland. The United States responded with a naval blockade, and the world braced for nuclear war. At one point, a Soviet submarine, B-59, surrounded by U.S. ships, prepared to launch a nuclear torpedo, believing war had already begun. The submarine commander required unanimous agreement from his officers to fire. One man, Vasily Arkhipov, refused to authorize the launch. His hesitation likely prevented World War III. These are just two of dozens of incidents that could have escalated into global catastrophe due to miscommunication, technical glitches, or human error. Others include the NORAD false alarm of 1979 and the Able Archer NATO exercise in 1983, which the Soviets misinterpreted as a potential real attack. These events highlight how fragile peace can be in a nuclear-armed world. The fact that humanity survived the Cold War without a nuclear detonation on a city is due more to individual restraint and sheer luck than systemic safety. It's a chilling reminder of how close we have come to total self-destruction. Which moment shocked you the most? Share your thoughts in the comments. Like the video, subscribe, and see you next time.